Here at the Parent Network, we're about real conversations for real families and individuals who are on a journey to grow in their emotional well being. Is that you? Whether you're a parent, caregiver, or someone invested in healthy relationships, this podcast is the space to uncover fresh perspectives, debunk outdated parenting patterns, and connect with the powerful stories of others. But we don't stop at the podcast. The Parent Network is your hub for thriving, offering tiered memberships for parents, transformative courses and workshops, and gatherings to equip you with tools for every stage of life. If you're ready to be a part of a parenting community that uplifts, supports, holds you accountable, and empowers you in all areas of your life, click the link in the description to join us today. And don't just stop there. Stay connected through our monthly newsletter by subscribing today and follow us on social media for updates, tips, and inspiration. Let's grow together at the Parent Network, where every step towards healing and thriving matters. Hey, y'all, we are back with another episode of the Parent Network podcast. I am your host, Ashley Ates, and today's conversation is really kind of geared towards the adult children. And I say children in quotation because you know that as a parent, no matter how old your child gets, they will always be your child. But the conversation that we're going to have today is around the idea of but I'm your mother. And I know this will resonate with some, and for others, it may not, but it is an important topic to talk about. So I want us to get into it, and I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, this podcast is also brought to you by children who are still at home on winter break. So if you hear a little extra commentary in the background, I did my best to try to make sure that they were quiet, but fortunately for me, I could not get out of the bed to record while they were still asleep all the way. I did a little bit, y'all, but I'm also learning to rest and just not force a thing. And so, as I said in season 1 of the podcast, this is a parent podcast. So if there are children in the background, I am a parent, I'm a mother, and sometimes it's not always ideal, but the information, the content, the concept, the perspective, and the wisdom is still going to be there. So just stay tuned, buckle up, listen in, because we get ready to ride this wave. So the whole concept or the idea of, but I'm your mother in adult child or adult parent rather relationships, however you want to spin it, is really an interesting concept because I remember in my, well, heck, a lot of the bulk of my adult life up until about 7 or 8 years ago, I did a lot of things to appease my mother, to make sure that I was, for lack of better words, in her good graces, I did a lot of things from guilt parenting, not guilt parenting, excuse me, guilt, being guilted in the parent adult relationship. And it wasn't until, and I shared this before with y'all, that, I had to really come to myself, come to Jesus, really seriously come to Jesus. And in therapy, did I realize that you're doing things for a person because us as parents, we are individuals. And so we operate in the role of parenting, but who we are is a woman or a man. And so I was doing something for an individual who happened to be my mother, but did not understand the nature of a mother and did not operate always in her best self. And so this is not, again, a dig. This is not any of those things. This is just my perspective, which I have shared with her. And, it is what it is. So about 27, and I've shared this story before if you've been following the podcast for any time, around the age of about 26, 27, or maybe it was 24. I can't remember. Let's do this, between 24 and 27, y'all. I sat down with my mom and I had a conversation with her just about, how I felt my childhood was, and I let her know that this is not an expression of, blaming you, shaming you, any of those things. But I do believe that healthy conversations, again, are necessary in the parenting dynamic because parenting is a relationship. And if you do not allow space for your children to come to you and express to you their perspective, because we cannot negate anyone else's perspective, then we're not doing them a full service in allowing them to be free in their speech. Okay, we'll just leave it at that, free in their speech. Because not everything that someone presents to you from their perspective is truthful, but that's okay as long as you understand that you don't need to always defend yourself. And I feel like a lot of times with this concept of, but I am your mother, there is so much defensiveness there because they have to assert this authoritative power. And again, in the previous episodes, we talked about ego-driven parenting. And when you are in this space of this is who I am, and so because this is who I am, you need to respect me and you need to understand that my authority over you is so supreme, you really lose a lot in your relationships. So with that concept of but I am your mother, when we sat down and we talked, literally, I couldn't even get any words out. When I opened up my mouth, all I had was tears, simply because that was where I was. I had so many emotions bottled up since childhood. So really being able to express them, to even be able to cry in front of her, I believe on an emotional, vulnerable level, that was the very first time that I had ever cried in front of my mom about how I felt, what I was dealing with, what was hurting, X, Y, and Z. And so with that, it was different. And I remember the assertiveness in her voice, in her posture was, what do you want me to do? What are you looking for? And all of the things. And so it was in that moment that I realized that sis did not have it to give, but it didn't happen right away, the full disconnection from everything. Because again, the back of my mind, it was, but this is my mom. And from her mouth to my ears, I'm your mother. So that unhealthy dynamic lingered for about 4 or 5 more years. I know it ended strongly before I was 30 because I had started therapy. And so as that dynamic was just shifting, I realized that that saying is very toxic. When we're talking to our adult children, and this is for the parents that have adult children, and let me know in the comments, y'all, like you all's perspective with this and you all's encounter, if you've had this encounter with your own parents, because it really, for men, it emasculates the man, the adult male child. And it also puts a guilt on the female adult child because you have these thoughts swirling in your head of, am I honoring my father and my mother? As Jesus said, it's the first commandment with promise. Am I doing all the things that I'm supposed to do? And we get in this space in our head where we have this checklist of, this is how I'm supposed to show up with my mom. This is how I'm supposed to show up with my dad. And sometimes it becomes disingenuous and it is more yielded into manipulative tactics. And those manipulative tactics can cause resentment, can cause disconnection, aka no contact, because you don't feel valued and you don't feel appreciated, but you also don't feel seen and heard. And in any relationship, in order for it to be healthy, you need to feel seen and you need to feel heard. Again, everyone's perspective may not be true, but it is absolutely their perspective. And if you value any relationship, you're going to want to listen. You're going to want to hear so that you can respond not from a place, again, of defensiveness, but from a place of reasoning. Okay, this is what I meant in this stage of my life. Because I've shared with you all, like my oldest son, he's getting ready to be 17 tomorrow. When you hear this episode, it won't be tomorrow, but he'll be 17. And he's seen me through every stage. And even as I was kind of reflecting on my own life, it was like the 19-year-old Ashley versus the 37-year-old Ashley right now is very different in her parenting and in her approach and in relationships and in life and all of the things. And it should be that way because we're growing and we're maturing, hopefully. So while the hope and the desire is for maturity, there's sometimes where there can be a pause in your development because of what you may have experienced. And that was quite the case for my mom. She did not desire to do the work to dredge up possibly trauma that she experienced. And I didn't hold that against her. It was a revelation that I actually received from the Lord in prayer and then through conversation with a friend that it was like, you were angry because I was angry with God because I didn't understand why he gave me the mother that he gave me that kind of, it was like an outcast of sorts and understanding that there was jealousy there. But again, this is why as parents, we really have to understand that we operate in this role because who we are as a woman and as a man or female and male is going to come over into the roles that we occupy. And I'm always going to say that, y'all. And if we are not doing introspective work and we're not allowing others to hold us accountable and we're not listening to reason and listening to relate, then we are always going to be defensive and it's always going to be some type of issue. And so I was having this conversation with a few other people that I know where the adult figures in their life, whether it was aunt, grandma, mother, father, whomever it is, at some point in the adult relationship, used and usurped that authority, tried to, hit them with the flex of, but I'm the adult. And it's like, well, yes, you are an adult, but at the same time, I'm an adult as well. And because our dynamic has changed, I think that it's important that you no longer see me as the 10-year-old, the 12-year-old, the 5-year-old, but that you see me through the lens of an adult so that way we can have an adult conversation and we can relate to one another. But I also still hold regard for you as being my aunt, my mother, my father, whomever it is. But I've said this before, a lot of times when people read the scripture in Ephesians 6 about children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, for this is the first commandment with promise. They don't go down to the next verse where it says, parents, do not provoke your children to wrath or to anger. That's so important. And if that was not important, I believe it would not be in the Holy Scriptures. So when we're talking about the family dynamic, the parenting dynamic, it is very possible that a parent can provoke their child to anger. Let's sit with that. Let's dive into that. What does it look like to provoke your child to anger? Well, we're having the conversation now. But I'm your mother. But I'm your father. But I'm your aunt. But I'm the one who raised you. When we throw things in the face of other people that were dependent on us, it says something about that person than it does about the one that is being projected on. I'm going to say that again. When we throw things in the face of others and we're trying to show them, tell them, cause them to remember the things that we've done, and it's not from a place of purity, but you're trying to use it as this golden ticket, it says more about you, your character, and where the health of your soul is versus the other individual. So provoking your child to anger has everything to do with causing strife, division, jealousy, breeding insecurity within your child by the words that you speak. And when I say child, y'all, I'm talking about our adults, parenting, and even children, because this translates across the board. As we were talking in the last two podcasts about ego-driven parenting, we have to come outside of ourselves when we are raising our children. In Proverbs, it talks about training them in the way in which they're to go, not in the way you want them to go, not in the way you think is always best, because your best is not God's best unless you have his perspective. And it's going to look different all the time. Why? Because they get to choose the path that they're going to go, just like you did, just like I did. I have free will because God gives it to us. And when he gives us free will, we have to understand that it is our job to steward and to be open and to be open and to be open, because we do not know what's going to happen in the course of life. And when our adult children come back to us to say, hey, I experienced this, or I felt this way, you don't want to shy away and you don't want to push them away because of your own defensiveness or your own ego or your own thoughts. Listen to respond and listen to relate, not always react. So in this cloudiness of the mind of my mom, where she would always say, but I'm your mother. I'm going to give you guys an example. So Mother's Day, when I became a parent, was never about me being a mother. It was always about her being the mother, as if she was like the mother of all mothers, y'all. Like, I can laugh about it now, but back then it will boil my blood. But because I was living under this guilt mentality that, oh my God, this is my mom, so I have to do this, I have to do that, I sat there until freedom came. And so when Mother's Day would roll around, it was like, okay, well, these are the things that I like, and this is what I want, and you should do this for me. It was never an ask. It was never a conversation of, hey, well, let's get together. It's Mother's Day. I want to celebrate you as a mother. Let's celebrate together. Any of those things. In hindsight, y'all, I see, I understand, and I know the dysfunction that took place within the dynamic of my mom and I. I see it clear now. When you're in dysfunction, sometimes you don't really see the dysfunction. You're just tolerating what you can receive because your heart desires it. Listen, that's a whole word. That's a whole word right there. When you are in dysfunction, sometimes you are not able to recognize that it is dysfunction because you're just tolerating whatever you can get because your heart desires it. And biologically, we are wired to receive connection from our parents, whether it's dysfunctional or functional, whether it's healthy or unhealthy. And we sit in it often longer than we need to because we can't disconnect from the fact that I am an adult and they are an adult. I am human and they are human, but they're my mother, but they're my father, but they're my caregiver, but they're the one who raised me. We have to learn how to disassociate the roles and understand how they operate as a person. When you do that, you are able to then think clearly, see clearly, understand clearly. That doesn't mean that you're going to lose love necessarily, but you may lose respect because you realize that, well, this individual doesn't respect me. They don't honor me. And honor is a two-way street. It goes both ways. So is respect. Honor is about placement. I honor you for the placement, the role that you occupy in my life. I respect you for what you gave to me, but I don't have to receive every single thing that you're now giving. And we have to understand that as parents, raising children in the matriculation of the relationship in parenting. Our kids don't have to receive everything that we're giving out, especially if it's against the order that God created and you are diminishing their esteem. I saw this quote and I kept seeing it circulate on social media where it said, the first enemy is the one that raised you. And I was like, ooh. One, because I could resonate with that, but now I resonate with it not from a place of I'm angry, I'm bitter, because I've shared with you all plenty of times that I have such healthy boundaries with my mom, and she has now learned to respect that. Like, she not playing with me. No, I'm not. I'm not. And then I also prayed and I asked the Lord, hey, God, listen, I don't want to be on the struggle bus in this relationship with her. I honor her. I love her. However, I understand that proximity with her is not best because I'm choosing to heal. I'm choosing to do what you're calling me to do. I'm choosing to raise my children in a different way. And I don't want anything or anyone. It's not just relegated to her. It's anyone that does not see the benefit of how I'm doing things impede the progress that is. And I believe that we have to take that mindset also on parents, that it doesn't matter who the person is, mother, father, yourself included. If you don't have anyone checking you, if you don't have anyone that's able to hold you accountable, that can see how you're parenting and say like, hey, do you think that you should do it that way? Or, how do you think they would feel? How do you think they feel? How would you feel if you were doing what you're doing to them, to you? I believe across the board that should be in parenting because it really does take a village. Jesus was about generations. The Bible, scripture is about generations, teaching generations. And you don't just teach generations by just teaching one person. It's across the board. So it's important that we get to the place where we recognize that our value as adult children and our value as those that are raising children is not in our ego. It's not in our, but I am, ... It's in our willingness to connect. It's in our willingness to relate. It's in our willingness to listen. It's in our willingness to hold space, even if we don't agree. It's just being willing. A lot of times in relationships, people are looking for willingness, not the word I'm trying, but the action of trying. Okay? Because a lot of times we say, well, I'm trying to do better. But in reality, we're not because we're stuck in our ways. And I know that boomer generation and, before them, they dealt with their own set of trauma and they dealt with their own way of dealing with it. And so now, because the world is growing, it has evolved, it has changed as it should. When we go to have conversations with our parents, let's remember that they're individuals as well. And so trying to just hit them with the blame game or trying to just, hit them with the flex of our big words is not going to do it because we have to relate to them in empathy as well as we want them to relate to us in empathy. And if it goes the way that your heart desires, that is amazing. But if it doesn't go that the way your heart desires, know that it's not a ding on who you are. You braved a conversation that you might have even been scared to have, but you did it and you recognize that you have power in your words, but you also have power in your relationships and you have power in your actions and that you need to move accordingly so that you're guarding your heart because the scripture says out of it flows the issues of life. So we're going to get more into this conversation. I'm going to have some crew members come on and kind of share their perspectives as well, because y'all are always going to get my perspective. But again, the podcast is about hearing the powerful stories of other individuals. So until next time, make sure that you are listening to either relate, to hold space, or to do all of them. I suggest doing all of them. But sometimes we have to gradually work our way up to these things. But at the end of the day, parents and listeners, make sure that you understand that whatever role you occupy, you don't try to occupy it through your ego and through pride because it's only going to cause more damage.